Welcome, 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 everybody. I'm your host today, Jon Fee. I'm the CMO here at VettaFi. For those that know me or have dialed into one of these virtual events in the past, you know I absolutely love data. I believe that data is greater than opinion. I believe that data used wisely can make your organization so much more effective and efficient at the same time. But not only do you get to hear from me today, I have two phenomenal guests joining me. One from Microsoft, who I will introduce in just a moment, and then another one from JP Morgan. I'm loaded with gratitude, not just for all of you joining us today, but to have Gaby join from Microsoft and then Danius to join from JP Morgan. I want to put both of them on the spot. We're going to start with you, Gaby, to just introduce yourself. Tell us about what you're doing at Microsoft, and if you don't mind, share that kind of data aha moment when you turned data into sales and we're effectively using data within your strategies for asset management and beyond. Certainly what you're doing there at Microsoft. So Gaby, over to you.
Thanks, John. So happy to be here today. I'm really glad we're doing this. A little bit about me. I stumbled my way into data and AI about 10 years ago when I was working in cap markets at one of the big banks. Got to work with asset managers, bankers, traders, and the like on digital and AI innovation. So how do we use all this new technology and really make a difference in the business, make money, save money. And just recently I switched over to Microsoft, and now I'm in an industry role, which has been an amazing opportunity to step out of one organization and really think broadly about how we can make the sum of the parts greater than the whole, and stitch together different parts of the tech ecosystem and the cap markets ecosystem to build new solutions for the industry. So great question on the aha moment. I think a few come to mind, but one kind of earlier on in my career that kind of cemented this was the right path for me was a specific meeting where we had industry heads with decades of experience in the same room as data scientists. And it was just great to see how both were so important to getting the right answer. And we had one individual who was able to kind of pick out different things that we should be doing with the data, assumptions we were missing. And then we had data science being able to pull out new trends that we didn't see coming. And just the harmony of both is really, really interesting. And glad to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you again for joining us, Gaby. I have a feeling that word harmony is going to come back up again in this discussion. Danius, I want to turn it over to you at JP Morgan. What are you doing there? Tell us about your data aha moment.
Yeah, thank you, first of all, for having me. Awesome to be here. Very excited. I've never done a webcast, so it's my first. Just a little bit about myself. I head up our global business intelligence and analytics team within asset management. So we work a lot with trying to use data to drive distribution strategies. So it's something I'm passionate about. It's something I've seen the growth of in the journey firsthand. And I think for me, I've been in the industry for almost 15 years, very much in this capacity for 98% of it. And the aha moment for me was sort of the culmination of a lot of time and energy with a lot of our stakeholders, distribution leadership, marketing leadership, but specifically, one of the things that really felt like data's finally at the table was when we worked with some of our distribution heads to actually create and drive a new coverage strategy, right? So we're talking about a strategy that requires millions of dollars of investment. It requires hiring human capital. It requires a lot of analysis for the market opportunity, the market fit. And so, historically, I think when I just started in the industry and data was just very foreign language, I think, to a lot of leadership, it was a lot more intuition, anecdote, experience, which still has a critical role. But that one example initiative, when data was actually driving a lot of decision-making in such a strategic investment, really felt like, okay, data's at the table. It's embedded in the decision-making framework. And from there, it's just continued to more and more, I think, integrate and entrench itself into sort of the fabric of our organization and hopefully many other organizations as well.
Nice. I like that. I have a similar example myself. It was finding myself at the table in the room, hearing organizations that I was with making decisions based off of gut or based off of optics, and then seeing how that played out. And very rarely was it ever successful. And as I, grew up in my career, I started to realize, like, well, in order for success to be achieved amongst a group of people using data, it can't be stored in one person's gut or one person's intuition. It's got to be shared. And the best things to share are data and driving that philosophical alignment around that data. So folks, we're going to be talking a lot about this during the discussion today. Again, I'm super grateful to have both Gaby and Danius join us, as well as all of you. Here's what we're going to cover on screen. Number one, data maturity in asset management. We're going to talk about where we're at. We're focusing within financial services on asset management just because of the number of folks joining this call. When we looked at the reg numbers, are heavily weighted towards asset management. We're going to talk about what it means for sales and marketing enablement. Everybody knows today that distribution is no longer just sales, and it's both the combination of sales and marketing working hand in glove. That is distribution today. That is distribution going on into the future. We're going to talk about the future of data. We're certainly going to touch on AI. It would be a huge miss if we didn't talk about AI. And then we're going to have questions coming from hopefully all of you that we're going to do our best to answer. I got to go over some housekeeping though. Not only do I love data, not only do I believe that data is greater than opinion, but I also love questions coming in from the audience. And so if you're looking at your console right now, on the right-hand side, you can start typing in questions whenever you want to, starting now. I, myself, Gaby or Danius will do our best to answer those questions. Please do not wait to the end. I also love reactions. So does everybody see the heart button that's on their screen? And if so, can I see some reactions coming on? Just give it a test to make sure you know how it's working. Awesome. Okay, everyone's finding the reaction button. I don't see any questions coming in yet. Although someone just texted me a question, I suppose you could do that too. We've got resources on the right-hand side, which also includes a chance to schedule time with folks here at VettaFi. And then we're going to be doing some polling and surveying. We're going to start with an easy poll question right now for all of you, now that everyone's getting comfortable with the console. Here's the question. It's on the screen, everybody. Do you agree or disagree? Do you agree or disagree? So you got two options here. The financial services industry lags behind in utilizing data to drive distribution and marketing growth. Again, I just want to know if you agree or disagree. The question again is, the financial services industry lags behind in utilizing data to drive distribution and business growth. Do you agree with that statement or you disagree? I'm going to give you all a couple of seconds to answer, and then we're going to take a look at those answers together. This is a fairly easy question. I'm pretty sure I know what the answer is going to be, but I'd love to hear what all of you think as well. Again, do you agree or disagree with the following statement? The financial services industry lags behind in utilizing data to drive distribution and business growth. And as I mentioned earlier on this webcast, today distribution is not just sales. It's certainly driven as much by marketing, if not more at times, depending on the particular client segment you're trying to reach, and certainly the products that you're trying to sell. I love that everyone's found the emojis and stuff on the screen as well. Okay, should we go to the answers? Can I get a thumbs up? Let's see some answers. Here we go, folks. Wow. Okay. So interesting splits. The lion's share agrees, 75%. Financial services industry lags behind in utilizing data to drive distribution and business growth. So that's, 3 out of 4 of you think like this industry continues to lag. Gaby or Danius, do you have any thoughts on this statement? And certainly as to why it continues to lag.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of better perspective, I suppose. I think there's no shortage of data being generated within an industry. I think for me, the opportunity feels like harnessing it and applying it in the most thoughtful, intelligent ways. And I would say, there's probably worse industries, but I do think that there's probably still quite a bit of green space to more dynamically, more thoughtfully apply some data, some insights. And so I did choose agree with some level of understanding that there's probably some things that it actually is quite far along relative to other industries, but I think there's a lot more opportunity to be a little bit more thoughtful with where and how you're using the data that you're generating.
Good points. What about you, Gaby? Any thoughts?
I tend to agree here. I think on a couple of fronts, if you think about the consumer landscape right now, my Spotify always knows what I want to listen to next. My maps are giving me the most targeted directions of where I'm going without me even, inputting the information. So I think that sets the bar really high on the consumer level for where we could go in financial services, and still a lot more ground for us to chase, especially on the distribution side versus the investment side of the house, which I know has been using, data and machine learning for so long. So it's exciting to see distribution running in that direction too.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, especially for the world of asset management. The product side, whether it's active or passive products, has been using data for decades. Whether it's fundamental bottom-up research, you name it, data has always been core to the product side of asset management. Distribution, though, at least in the multi-decades that I've been in it, has really been led by gut and instinct. And I think that's a core driver of why 75% of the folks dialed into this call think the industry continues to lag in using data to drive distribution and business growth. But here's the silver lining. It's nothing but upside from here on out. And I've been a part of initiatives to where you just start using data in a very clean, simple work system, and you drive significant double-digit growth. I want to read this quote that comes in from McKinsey & Co. I know when we were prepping for this, like Danius, you have other quotes. I'd love to hear from them or examples, and same with you, Gaby. But according to McKinsey & Co., organizations that leverage customer behavioral insights and data outperform peers by 85% in sales growth. 85%. And more than 25% in gross margin. So why continue to lag? When you have numbers like that, opportunities like that in front of you just to make the change, and I recognize change is hard within organizations, but when you can hear it from the great minds at McKinsey that you have the potential to drive 85% in sales growth and 25% in gross margin, like it's worth getting on the track of moving out of the laggard space and being much more data forward in your decision making. Gaby or Danius, any thoughts from you on this quote, or is there something else that you go to within your organization?
Yeah, we did a similar study at Microsoft, and we found the same thing. Those using AI are closing 10% more pipeline, 20% faster close rate, almost 10% more revenue, and the numbers are there. So it's really, really encouraging.
And maybe just to add from our point of view, I think we have a few sound bites as well around the timeliness of client outreach, right? So the value of leads, qualified leads, and how those drive higher conversion rates, higher average ticket sizes relative to sort of the more organic outreach strategies. So I think everything points in that same direction, Jon, to your comments and your quote here.
Absolutely. Okay, so what have we established? There's nothing but upside within the asset management space. There's lots of great minds, from the consulting space, or what Microsoft is thinking, or what JPM is thinking on the value that you can drive across your distribution efforts, and certainly selling more products using data. We see it so much here at VettaFi. But I want to talk about some of the common misconceptions. And I think this is just three of the myths we need to debunk that I think impedes the financial services space, specifically asset management, from being much more data forward. Number one, more data equals better outcomes. that's not necessarily the truth of it. And what this actually means is, go out and collect as much data as possible. Will lead to better sales and marketing outcomes. I was part of an initiative over 10 years ago where we created a market mix model using, I think, 40 to 50 different data points. It could not have been more complicated, and it just barely got off the ground, and then no one wanted to use it anymore. It was just too cumbersome. The analogy that I used was, all we were trying to do is move from point A to point B. We just needed a dashboard that looked like a Honda Civic or a Toyota Tercel. Think about the car. And we went and created a dashboard that looked like the space shuttle. No one was going to go to the moon, but we just over-engineered it and poured in way too much data where it just was never used. And it was, after sadly a good 12 plus months of work, just tossed out and left on the side. Another big myth that we're up against is having data means you're data driven. Not necessarily true. And we're going to talk a lot about work systems on this call. And then 3, AI or machine learning will replace human decision making. Hard replays, not necessarily true as well. Gaby, I want to hear from you. When you think about these myths that are persistent within the industry, specifically like asset management, which one do you think is the strongest? And is there a myth that's missing from the screen right now?
Yeah, John, I think you hit some really good points here. I think on the first one, more data equals better outcomes. We see that debunked time and time again, where having the data is one bit, but connecting it and creating a harmonious view of the world is a lot more challenging. And getting your different data sets to talk to each other is really a prerequisite to getting those answers and outcomes that people are looking to drive. Another one I see is reporting, right? So people might be getting loaded with reports in their inbox every day, or dashboards are becoming easier and easier to build. But having a report doesn't always mean you have an answer. And a lot of times there's a lot of strain on the data teams to predict every question that might be asked of data. And that's a tough spot to be in. So kind of to your third point here on AI, it's really exciting now to see that push towards talking to data in a conversational way, and this whole Gen AI craze and how powerful it really is to make the most of our data and get to that answer people are looking for.
I like that. Is there a myth that you think is missing from the screen?
If I had to add one more, I'd say data isn't just numbers, it's text too. So especially in distribution, our sales teams are out talking to folks all day long, and the content of those meetings, it might not appear to be, data in the traditional sense with rows and columns, but there's so much we can do around different types of language data. And I'm seeing a lot of advancements on that in the industry.
Well said. What about you, Danius? What misconception do you think is the strongest here from your vantage point? And then is there something that's missing from the screen?
It's a good question. I would say, they all resonate for sure. I've lived and experienced all of them. For me, the one that probably hits the closest is the analogy you gave about the dashboard. I think what often we find is data teams feel like every number or attribute or field that they can report on, they should. And one of the big progressions that I think is important for organizations to think about is, with respect to all the other metrics, a few metrics matter more to drive the P&L, to drive the customer experience, to drive the customer engagement. And so being very thoughtful and intentional with understanding what are those metrics that actually, as Gaby said, provide the right answers to make decisions. That to me feels like the biggest misconception and the biggest sometimes maybe waste of effort. When people feel like we generate all this new data, we're now collecting this metric and this data point, they feel like they have to visualize all of that. And I think in truth, you have to find what are the metrics that drive as signals the most important client experiences, P&L, et cetera, that you're interested in. And for me, that feels like the biggest misconception, the biggest sort of malpractice in that endeavor. With respect to your question about anyone that's missing, for me, it's a little bit the AI one, where depending on which organization you work at and how much your organization's bought in, I think everybody very much believes in the disruptive and transformative future value of AI. I think a little bit of the misconception or the myth may be that it's gonna cure all your pain. It's gonna cure all your problems, and it won't. And a lot of, I think, what that is brought back to the forefront is having a very clear data foundational, defining your system of records, sort of data quality priority and importance, that without having that stuff well defined, the AI is going to be to some degree moot. And I think we'll probably talk about that a little bit later. But that is probably one of the big myths for me that feels like I hear and I see, but probably is worth getting a little bit more underneath.
Absolutely. Hey, folks, spoiler alert. Go ahead. I was just going to say, like, it's now 75.9% agree that this industry is lagging. And the spoiler alert that I have for all of you is, if you think AI is going to flip the results on the screen, think again. Like, AI is not going to solve that for any of us in this industry. Back into the myths, though, and I want to, although we didn't use the word insights, we talked about patterns that emerge from data, the analysis that has to happen of data. And I believe that's often a misconception as well. Like, it's never going to be just the singular data point. It's going to be multiple data points that you're triangulating that gives you that pattern, that trend line that then helps you course correct what it is that you're doing. Again, back to the dashboard of a Honda Civic or a Toyota Tercel, two cars I've never owned, but I reference a lot because they were just so, they're just so readily available on the road. If you think about a dashboard in one of those cars, it's very, very basic. If all you're doing is staring at the gas gauge, that's not going to tell you, when you're going to make it to your destination. That's just telling you if you have enough gas to make it to your destination. If all you're doing is staring at the speedometer, that's not going to be the only thing that's going to tell you if you're going to make it to your destination. You need to start to look at, okay, how many more miles do I need to go? At what speed am I going? Do I have enough gas to carry me to get to that destination? And again, that's how you need to start to triangulate data. And what I've often done, and I do with a lot of clients here at VettaFi, when they show me their dashboards and I think, oh my God, this is the space shuttle. The first thing that I ask is, all right, this data point, if it's positive or negative, what do you do? And a lot of times clients, asset managers say, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you're tracking this on a dashboard. You're probably sending it out to everybody. You probably have a BI team that you're paying to pull it together. So great, you showed me the monthly data. This is the dash that you use to run your business. If this particular metric is positive or negative, what do you do? What's the change in your behavior? And if the answer is, we've never really thought about it like that, I typically encourage folks to go back and rethink those data points that they're pulling. I'll often ask, like, if you know all three of these data points are positive or negative, like, what's the different behavior you're going to drive through your organization? If there still isn't an answer, then there's work to be done. Okay, so we know we're lagging in this industry. It looks like it's 76% and growing now. So some folks are still answering that survey question, which is great. I want to tee up both you and Danius and Gaby to talk about this data maturity curve that's on screen. And it really speaks to 4 clean stages where a lot of organizations are either striving to get to or maybe currently stuck at in their data kind of adoption and mindset. So, hey, Gaby, I'm going to go to you first on this, but Danius, I also want to hear your point of view. So over to you, Gaby.
Thanks, Jon. Yeah, I think you both made the point about AI and how it might be the dream state, and there's a lot of buzz around it now, but there really is so much that comes before it. And I think this graphic here does a really good job of painting that journey that it takes to get to this like nirvana state that we're we're talking about today. So no matter what organization you're in, you might resonate with one of these 4 buckets in terms of, do you have the foundations for AI? Is your data available? Is it in an analytical system? Do you have people working on it every day trying to bring those insights out from, the data in its raw form? Are we reactive? Are we kind of responding to clients in a more reactive way, or are we using our data to predict what's going to happen next? And that allows the proactive behavior that you kind of spoke to there, Jon. And then finally, optimized is, to me, the state where we get to a point where we can predict the right thing on the right channel at the right time for the right person at a very granular level. And then how does that drive a level of efficiency and, honestly, like, client satisfaction that we're all striving for every day? So message here is that it's a journey, right? And we want to get there, but there's a lot of really foundational pieces required to get there. And Danius, I know you work in it every single day, so I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
Me too.
Yeah. I had a long time ago, I had a manager who would always say, there's a maturity model. And at first we were like, why do you keep saying that? But I think we started to understand that there's a maturity to 2 things: the capabilities of your data ecosystem, and the organizational readiness too, in terms of using data and harnessing data. And I think there's different words and categories you can probably use to reflect that. I think this slide does a nice job of it. But for me, the progression sort of starts with just define what are your systems of record. Like, what is each data store creating? Because often what we see is people copy data to this server and this database and that database. And so you have this spaghetti bowl of data that's copied all over. And so it's very important to sort of define your systems of record. When you have those defined and you have processes to maintain the quality of it, then think about how you start to sort of stitch that data together. Because when you start to stitch the data together, I think, to the slides point here, you start to provide a little bit more relevant insights, a little bit more relevant reporting, a little bit more relevant metrics for the stakeholders. And that, I think, goes a long way in terms of getting people comfortable with using data, with getting comfortable using data to make decisions. What I think it then sets an organization up for is being a little bit more, as Gaby said, predictive, right? You can't jump from underdeveloped to proactive or optimized or predictive, because that scares people. And I think you need to be very intentional to sort of walk that path before suddenly you say, I have data, I have insights, I have AI that says this is the next best thing to do. And I think if not slowly sort of articulated and progressed to that point, it's really, really hard to get that buy-in, to get that excitement. And I think down the road, where AI is going is a little bit more of, we would sort of call it this cognitive state, where these systems are smart and there's these sort of intelligent AI capabilities that optimize sort of in real time what people want and look for. But that feels like it's sort of the next frontier and still a little bit away. But that's kind of how we have thought about this maturity model. And we find is important to, again, that old adage of crawl before you walk, before you run. And we do find that to also be critical in educating and getting people comfortable with data across an organization.
I think that's spot on. For those that are dialed in, you're probably plotting yourself and your organization on this maturity curve. It's human behavior. Like, where am I? Rest assured, if you're plotting, yourself or your firm at underdeveloped or reactive or proactive or optimize, in this month alone, I've talked to 24 issuers, asset managers, New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles area, out in Chicago. And the one thing that I've learned is you can be just as successful if you're at underdeveloped versus reactive or proactive. The most important thing, though, is what you see on that x-axis, level of trust in data. So when a firm has trust in the data, and I mean it is enterprise trust, whether it's a firm of 10 people, 100 people, 10,000 people, when they believe that that is the data that they're all measuring themselves against, using to extract insights, there isn't any better data out there, when that trust exists, you're going to be successful. You're going to be successful. You might not like where you're at on this maturity curve, but you will be successful. But there's a caveat to this. No one trusts data until they're actually knowledgeable on what that data means, and they have the knowledge to understand there isn't better data. And this is also a part of just human behavior. If you think about relationships, you want to trust people, but you need to learn more about them to begin with. You got to gain that knowledge about who is it that this person is? What is it that this product is? What is it about this service? Like, I need to learn about it. I need to increase my knowledge of it before I trust. There's a very similar relationship that we all have with data as well. Before you can trust, you need to increase your knowledge of what it is, why it's important, where it came from, and so forth. But I can promise you, I've talked with issuers of all sizes. They're all at varying stages of this curve. Those that are successful, regardless of maturity stage, when they have that trust in the data, they're driving good results using that data. I'm going to move to the next slide here. There is no silver bullet. And what this means is, like, driving impact with data takes more than technology. It demands strong organizational buy-in. And again, back to that comment I had about trust, when everybody within the shop is trusting the data, they start to see those favorable results of more effectiveness and growth, more efficiency and growth. But it requires a lot of change management to get there. I want to hear from both of you, Gaby and Danius, about, there is no silver bullet. I like starting with that statement, but I also believe there is a silver bullet. It's just a little bit of a twist than what we've been talking about. But thoughts from you, Danius, about driving impact with data. Why does it take more than technology? What does that mean?
Yeah, I have some thoughts, but if you have the silver bullet with the twist, I'm not sure my thoughts will be as impactful, but I'll share my experience to some degree. I think what we found is the organizational change is in some ways just as hard, if not harder, than the actual technology investment, the data investment, et cetera. However, I think what we have found is to drive that broader change, understanding, education, it's really hard to centralize it from a small data team. And so what works well is finding, you can call it the power users, the data literate, more literate sort of data individuals across different functions and teams to become extensions of what you're trying to achieve as a data organization, to become in some ways, the peers, the leads for those different functions, to articulate the strategy, to articulate, the value of it, the insights, et cetera. And so for me, at least, it's very difficult to drive that organizational change and buy-in without really clearly creating a strategy of education, of building the trust, as you said, John. I think that's spot on, and of building a little bit the literacy, right? And I think that a lot of organizations need that, and doing that just from a small centralized group is very, very hard.
Yeah. What about you, Gaby?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, we're all here to innovate, and we see this upside for the industry, but innovation's inherently uncomfortable. And in those disruptive times, like, the trust is more important than ever between data teams, and even just trusting the data, as you said before. So I think earning that trust, going at the right pace that makes sense for the organization, making sure all the functional stakeholders believe in the vision before charging ahead. Because it's one thing to get the right answer, but if the people don't believe that it's right, you have a whole different issue to resolve. So I think it's really important to build that camaraderie and that, joint vision and strategy for how to pursue these initiatives.
Spot on. The silver bullet is not just a particular piece of data. I think it lies within keeping it simple and focus on the work system, and recognizing that a work system it's just as much people and how they're engaging with the technology as it is just the technology. I want to talk about the people. We work in an industry that's full of different personas of colleagues. often portrayed in sitcom shows like The Office. Sometimes I watch shows like that or Severance, and I think, oh my God, that reminds me of someone I used to work with. Like, there's a lot of personalities in this industry. It's no different than the tech industry and other industries that I've worked in as well. But Gaby, would you touch on some of these personas that you see on screen, the super user, the data explorer, the time constrained decision maker, and maybe what you found key to get them to trust data, to use data more, to become more effective as a data distribution organization?
Definitely. Even taking a step back for a second. So the mission statement for Microsoft is to empower all people to achieve more. So that's very, very broad, and inherent in that is trying to address each of these personas and others we might have missed equally. And that requires quite a bit of effort and intention to understand why people use data the way they do, why they trust or don't trust it. All the way on the left, you have super users, you have those ahead of the curve, ambitious people willing to try out a new data, give the data teams feedback, be that champion across their desk for the power of this new technology. And those people can be amazing to work with. They'll give you the tough feedback that you need to hear to make it better. But then sometimes you have others that are busy, right? They're not willing to kind of invest that kind of time, and they're like, call me when it works and it's going to make a difference. But I'm less interested in that, innovation journey and that build stage. So I think no matter where you might fall in this spectrum, I think it's like really important for the teams that I work closely with to just keep all of these different mindsets at the heart of what we're building. And eventually, we will try and look to empower each of these people a little bit differently.
Well said. When we were prepping for this discussion, we also talked about there's a lot of other personas across our organizations that aren't on this screen. And I think that's the big takeaway here, folks, is as you're getting your company to use more data, to make data-driven decisions, just recognize that not only are firms on various stages of a data curve and data comfort curve, so are individuals. A persona that's not on screen that we talked about was, almost like the data fake, the person that talks a lot about data but never uses data, that's always saying data, but then you never see the outcome of that data to actually drive growth. So you just got to recognize within your company, as you're trying to drive this change, as you're buying data, as you're building those dashboards, like really spend the time with each of the personas, tailoring your discussions around how the work system's going to work, including them as part of the solution. Danius, let's talk about the value of building the 360 view using some of the categories that are on screen here. What's your perspective of the 360 view today?
I think it's so paramount to any go-to-market strategy and any capability, experience, insight that you're trying to deliver to a client, a customer, a stakeholder, whoever, because all of us, especially these days, right? Maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, it was a little bit more 1 to 2 channels of engagement, of data generation. That has completely exploded in the last decade. And so I think one of the things that's really important to think about and that we have found is so critical to understand what our clients are interested in is to connect the engagement and the profile and the persona across each of these different, often fragmented systems. And if I have a sense of who Jon is and how he's engaged with our website and the webcast he dials into, the events he's attended, right, his purchasing habits, who he is outside of maybe his professional life, what the salespeople have talked to him about, etc., it gives a much more complete picture of what's relevant, what's important to you, who are you, how are you with us, right? Are you somebody who's very embedded in our ecosystem? You're a huge follower, fan of our organization, or are you somebody who's, you've maybe purchased a product or two, but it's been transactional, you got what you needed, and that's it. And so for me, I think the buzzword of 360 is maybe overly diluted by now, but I think the spirit of it is so important, so critical, and drives so much of, I think, your go-to-market strategy, as I said.
I think that's very true. I think that an important component that's, it's not on the screen, but you got to recognize there's more than just the 6 hexagons that you see on screen that can all flow into your 360. The weighting of value of each of these hexagons is constantly changing. If you roll back the clock, say 2 to 3 decades on distribution within financial services, specifically asset management, sales activity, that hexagon would be enormous on here. Why? There wasn't digital activity. And so you got to factor that in too as you're pulling all this data in. The value of it will not stay consistent in the future. The weighting is going to start to change for you. Gaby, how do all of you think about the 360 at Microsoft?
I think, like you said, there's the 6 hexagons here and really more by the day as we look at unlocking language types of data sets or new data monetization strategies in the industry. The list of insights about an individual is growing, and being able to really see somebody from all angles is paramount. So I think it's fundamental, and it'll really power a lot of the AI use cases that we're hearing more and more about. The AI is only as good as the information you give it. One quote I use probably more than I need to around this is, people look at AI like it's going to be a super genius that will know everything, but it's not, right? It's more like having a million interns, and you need to train it. You need to give it the data. You need to monitor it and get it going before it can hit its stride. So this is the fuel for any AI initiatives or ambitions you might have.
I think that's right. Hey, we have a question that's come in. The question is, how many metrics should I be looking at on a distribution dashboard used to optimize growth and productivity? So, how many maybe widgets or how many data points should I be looking at? Gaby or Danius, do you have an answer for that question?
I can start. I would say I don't know that there is a singular right answer, right? It depends somewhat on your organization, what your focus areas are. But as a best practice, I would say if you have more than 6 to 8 metrics that are the critical metrics on your dashboard that are informing the decision making, you're probably losing a little bit the forest through the trees. And so, again, I don't want to use such a hard and fast figure or range, but in most cases where I've seen, whether it's a stakeholder in marketing and sales and client service and operations, for the most part, I think you want to organize around sort of that 6 to 8 range, because generally those are the ones that are the most telling to customer success, to the profitability of the organization, to the cost efficiency of the organization. Outside of that, you're starting to taper more into what maybe I would call secondary metrics, or a little bit maybe more of the white noise of metrics that are still helpful leading indicators, but maybe not quite at the level of criticality as some of those other ones.
Yeah,
in my
I think
experience.
that's right. What about you, Gaby?
Yeah, I think often less is more here, where if you're changing direction and metrics and how you're calculating things too often, you might be stopping and starting before you can kind of hit that momentum and really seeing over time how you're improving and the impact of some of your changes in behaviors on the business. So I agree with what Danius said. It's less about trying to measure everything and more about being intentional and consistent in that path forward.
Yeah. Here's where the rubber hits the road, though. I mean, on screen, there's a 360. There's 6 different hexagons. What we're saying is like 1 data point per hexagon. 1 data point per hexagon. And what I've noticed to work really well for asset management organizations, when they take the time to really have that healthy debate on the inside of like, yeah, that's great. We have all this data on digital activity, 40 data points, 40 for our events, 40 on project purchasing. But what is the number one thing that's most important when we think enterprise-wide for drive growth? When they go through that arduous task and really, really challenge each other on like what's most important, those dashboards usually hit the nail on the head. And a way to have that conversation inside is think about a particular team, do they have the right data? I think the best team to use, the best analogy, is a relay race team. If you're thinking about multiple functions within your company as a singular runner as part of a relay race team, then the client or the new business opportunity, or however you're measuring growth, is the baton. And if you force yourself with all of your partners to talk about what is a baton that we trust, the data that we trust to move as fast through the organization as possible, as many times as possible. If you can really push on that analogy and have that conversation with your colleagues, you're going to get to those 6 to 8 metrics that both Gaby and Danius have talked about. If you don't take the time to do that up front, and you're still using that relay race analogy, what you'll see is one function is running as hard as they can. So think about me and Gaby and Danius as on a relay race team. And I'm running out of the block as hard as I can. I've got that baton. And if Gaby and I, with Danius and everybody else, as part of this kind of hypothetical organization, haven't taken the time to really nail what are those 6 to 8 metrics, what happens is I run my heart and soul out. I get to Gaby with the baton, and she grabs it and says, this baton, it's wood. I thought it would be like hollow and more like a modern baton, and aluminum were really lightweight. And I'm just drenched because I've done my part in that enterprise to run as hard as fast as I can. But Gaby's not ready to run. She doesn't have trust in that baton. And that baton is the data, that is for her to do what she needs to do next. And if you just use that analogy to think, how is it do we all get aligned? So when Jon gets to Gaby or Gaby gets to Danius, she's already running by the time I get to her. She's not even looking at me. Her hand is behind her back to take that baton and to run that opportunity across the finish line to drive growth for the organization. If you do that up front, you'll start to use data in a way that's truly making your organization more effective. Here's something else to be mindful though. And we've talked a lot about work systems. We've talked a lot about the personalities in work systems. We've talked a lot about how it's 50% people at all different stages, organizations in different stages, technology, try to keep it simple. When you map all this out though, and this is a view that we have within VettaFi of our kind of Rube Goldberg apparatus to do this, it is very complicated, people. There's a lot of moving pieces across each different touch point of a client, especially with the use of technology today, digital today, to drive more and more engagement with your clients, to get them to research your products, increase interest in the products, talk to a salesperson about that product, then to buy it, then you want that repeat purchase. It's complicated, but you got to take the time to map it out as clean as possible. And this is what that map could look like for all of you. This is something that we have here at VettaFi that just shows the inner workings of everything top of funnel that digital is driving all the way through to a sales team, what they're doing. We use Salesforce here. It's my former organization. I still love that company. But you got to take the time to map it out and try to get it onto one screen, one page, and get everybody to understand how it works with the intent to drive growth for your organization. And when you do that, you're going to start to get a flywheel going. So again, more people are trusting in data. More people are thinking about the work system. More people are thinking about the work system within your organization as a relay race team. Growth, or that new business opportunity, is the baton passing from various people throughout your organization, from maybe from inbound, from digital team over to your product team, a product specialist, to your sales team. Maybe you pull in an executive leader to help get the deal across the line. But you got to think about the flywheel across all those touch points. Danius, how do you think about the flywheel over at JP Morgan?
I think that's spot on. I think it's a great analogy. And I think that's exactly right. It's a virtuous cycle, right? And so for us, some of what and how we've experienced this is that when we've built, let's say, capability for a stakeholder internally, maybe a salesperson, when you build them a data capability or intelligence, some insights, provide it to them, when they're consuming it, when they provide that feedback and maybe elements or intuition or components that you haven't thought about, that makes the model and the system smarter, right? And so it maybe starts with a little bit more anecdotal, but over time, what I think we're trying to do, and a lot of organizations are trying to do, is when you build these machine learning algorithms that deliver some suggestion or some recommendation to a stakeholder, their behavior then can also inform the next iteration or the next version of that capability, right? So a lot of social media organizations are doing this. You think about TikTok and their algorithms, you think about Instagram and their algorithms. I think the flywheel is good, and not just for usage and getting people more embedded into sort of using data and thinking about data as part of their practice, but also the capabilities themselves and how people provide feedback and how their behaviors can inform future versions of those capabilities. To me, it all bubbles up together, right? And so getting people comfortable, getting people engaged, getting feedback up front, and over time, letting those behaviors evolve some of the capabilities, it all works together. And I think you hit it spot on. If you're missing certain pieces of that, the system starts to sort of break down and you're not moving forward. And so I think the relay race is a great analogy. And that's one of the things that we're really focused on, is using the feedback, using the behaviors, using the practices of what people tell us is helpful and is not, to inform future versions of these things.
I like that. Gaby, I want to tee you up to go deeper on AI. Within the space of distribution, technology is constantly changing the landscape. Distribution 30 some odd years ago was a human being and a phone, a landline. Distribution has changed through social media. Distribution has changed through the advancements of marketing automation, on and on and on. Distribution is changing again because of AI right in front of us as in other emerging tech. How do you think about the future of AI and other emerging tech at Microsoft and the impacts that it has on your distribution and sales growth models?
It's a great question, John, and I still think we're in very early innings. First is getting this data connected and really just allowing people to think about data differently. So if it used to be a Post-it note and now it's a meeting note record in your CRM system, right? That's still insight about the client that you might know that the rest of your peers and relay race team members don't know. So how do we pass all that intelligence back and forth in this, momentous way where people are building off of the info from the person prior, and you really do have that team effort across an organization. And data and digital really is the channel in my mind to connect all of these groups and create that unified front outwardly. So seeing a lot more and more buy-in and agreement with that at a high level in the industry. But I think, the devil's still in the details. So making it come to life is the fun part, and there's still a long way to go. So here we have a couple of trends that we're looking at, and really the highest demands that we're hearing from asset managers around how they want to use data and AI and take this technology forward in their organization. I think we talked a lot about clients today, and it is definitely, I would say, number one in a lot of ways. So how do we use AI to allow clients to self-serve when they want, and then free up a lot of sales marketing folks to focus on what's more important and do the more exciting parts of their day, right? If I think about why people became asset managers or some of the intentions of taking on some of these roles, it's not to write down your meeting notes at the end of clients, right? Like when you finish a great meeting, you feel jazzed about the ideas that were shared, you want to take action, you don't want to take notes. So how do we get the machines to do some of that, more of that administrative task in your day, and then free you up for, driving to the next evolution of your business and growing your business. So lots changing on the client front to give them the tools to power themselves when they want to, and only come to you for the stickier questions that you really want to spend time together on. That kind of leads into this next one on employee productivity. Again, how do we automate away the no joy parts of the day and just double down on what's most important? and to do it all in a very, risk and compliant way. The regulations are changing daily. They vary globally. So a company like Microsoft, we're constantly talking to regulators about how do we meet their requirements, exceed their requirements, and do all this in a way that's putting privacy and security at the center.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a trend that we'll see continue. And then this last piece on platform, it's really doing it in a scalable way. So it's one thing if you can help, an individual, but we're kind of at the point in the maturity curve where we want to see the whole industry adopt some of these new ways of doing business and just see how much growth it can really fire up. So lots going on, tons of AI use cases I'd love to chat more about with anyone interested. But definitely early innings if I had to guess.
What about you, Danius? Thoughts on the future of AI and emerging technology?
Yeah, I think Gaby hit a lot of the points spot on. In my opinion, and what I'm seeing is within our industry, the middle two feel like the lowest hanging fruit, making people's day jobs more productive. They can do more with the same is how we've been framing it. And I think taking out the no joy parts, one. And then I think there's a lot of risk and compliance assistance that maybe AI and intelligence can provide. I think the ones on the bookends are a little bit more larger organizational decisions, right? Because when you're talking about transforming the client experience, there's for now probably still some human in the loop that will need to persist for some period of time, but that brings a different level of rigor, of discipline required. And then I think with modernizing platforms, that's a hard decision to make because it takes a lot of energy, a lot of investment, and it's sometimes the foundational transformation that's needed to enable the AI capabilities. So it's not necessarily seen as exciting, and the outcomes aren't quite as maybe felt as acutely by senior leaders. And so it's just a harder decision to make. But I think with time, we're going to see more and more from the inside moving out, because that to me feels like the larger opportunities and larger green spaces down the road.
I think that's spot on. I'm certainly here for AI eliminating as many mundane tasks as possible. Folks, we're towards the tail end of our webcast. We've debunked myths. We've dug deep into, how many data points you should be looking at, the different personas of data users across your organizations, work systems, what they look like, why it's important to keep them simple, how you can drive growth using data, regardless of what stage you're at of your data maturation within your organization. You've got an offer from Gaby at Microsoft. If you want to learn more, you've got to follow her on LinkedIn. If you're not, follow Danius on LinkedIn as well. Certainly always reach out to VettaFi. Come to me if you have questions about how to use data to drive more sales growth and supercharge your distribution in 2025 and beyond. These myths are debunked. I'm still filled with a ton of gratitude. Massive shout out to you, Gaby, and to you, Danius. You guys each have a minute. Best piece of advice in a minute each that you want all of our listeners to take with them on using data to drive sales growth. Gaby, over to you.
I think the AI era is here and it's here to stay. So the more you can do to try out some of these newer tools, give that feedback and help us build that kind of relay race between data, sales, marketing, all the different organizations, wherever you might sit. Time's now. Let's do it.
I love it. I love it. What about you, Danius? Best piece of advice to drive sales growth with data?
Yeah, I think define your objectives, your outcomes as your value prop as an organization, and figure out how data and AI can enable that. It's going to be an enabler to those capabilities and those outcomes. And as Gaby said, the time's now. So every minute that you wait is a minute somebody else is moving forward.
I love it. Folks, start embracing AI. Enjoy the rest of your days. It's so exciting for me to see that over 40 firms, multiple members from each of those firms dialed into this call today. On behalf of TMX and VettaFi, thank you for joining us. Gaby, thank you, and Microsoft for being here. Danius, thank you, and JPM for being here as well. Until next time, folks, thank you.